The ancient stadium of Zephyria Prime stretched across an entire continent, its crystalline spires reaching toward 3 purple suns that bathed the arena in ethereal light. For 8,000 years, this sacred ground had hosted the Galactic Athletic Championships, a celebration of physical prowess that brought together the greatest athletes from across known space. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The competitions traditionally lasted 4 months, with elaborate ceremonies, strategic rest periods, and carefully choreographed events that honored the athletic traditions of hundreds of civilizations. Sarah Chen stood at the edge of the registration platform, her Earth-issued uniform feeling woefully plain among the magnificent displays of alien athletic wear. Around her, beings of incredible diversity prepared for what many considered the most prestigious sporting event in the galaxy. The Korathian delegation wore suits that shifted color with their emotional states, currently displaying confident gold patterns. The Vexillan team moved with fluid grace, their elongated limbs perfectly adapted for their homeworld's low gravity. Crystalline athletes from the Helix Nebula refracted light into dazzling displays as they warmed up. Sarah had never expected to be here. 3 months ago, she had been training for the Pan-Pacific Swimming Championships in her hometown of Melbourne, Australia. Her specialty was distance swimming, and while she was competitive at the planetary level, she certainly never imagined representing her entire species on a galactic stage. That changed when the Galactic Athletic Council issued an unexpected invitation to Earth, offering humanity its first opportunity to participate in the ancient games. The invitation had come through diplomatic channels, delivered to Dr. Marcus Webb, Earth's xenobiological liaison. Dr. Webb was a thin, nervous man who had spent 15 years studying alien physiology and had never expected to become involved in sports administration. He found himself thrust into the role of team manager for humanity's first galactic athletic delegation, a responsibility that terrified him more than years of studying hostile alien organisms. The selection process had been rushed and chaotic. Earth's athletic organizations had no framework for choosing representatives for competitions they had never imagined possible. How do you prepare for events when you don't know what those events might be? How do you train athletes for environments and gravitational conditions that vary wildly across participating worlds? The selection committee had ultimately chosen 12 athletes representing diverse disciplines, hoping to cover as many potential event categories as possible. Besides Sarah, the human delegation included Marcus Rivera, a marathon runner from Mexico City whose endurance capabilities had earned him 3 Olympic gold medals. His lean frame and methodical approach to distance running had made him an obvious choice for whatever endurance challenges the galactic competition might present. Jessica Park, a gymnast from South Korea, brought flexibility and precision that seemed likely to translate across different gravitational environments. Her ability to maintain perfect form while executing complex movements had impressed scouts who were guessing about what skills might prove valuable. The team also included twin brothers from Nigeria, David and Daniel Okoro, who had dominated Earth's track and field scene for the past 5 years. Their explosive speed and competitive drive had made them legends in human sprinting, though no one knew how their capabilities would measure against beings evolved under different planetary conditions. Elena Petrov, a strength athlete from Russia, possessed raw power that had shattered every human weightlifting record, but the delegation wondered how strength would translate when competing against species that had evolved under crushing gravity, or in environments that required completely different physical adaptations. Dr. Webb stood near the registration desk, clutching a data tablet that contained everything Earth scientists had been able to compile about galactic athletic competitions in the 3 months since receiving the invitation. The information was frustratingly incomplete. Most of what they knew came from fragmentary cultural exchanges and second-hand accounts from traders and diplomats. The actual rules, event categories, and competitive formats remained largely mysterious. The Galactic Athletic Council had provided basic participation guidelines, but these documents seemed to assume knowledge that humans simply didn't possess. References to traditional seasonal rotations, gravitational adjustment periods, and cultural honor observances filled the official communications without explanation. Dr. Webb had spent sleepless nights trying to decode these cryptic requirements, consulting with xenobiologists, cultural anthropologists, and anyone else who might offer insight into what their athletes were facing. As Sarah observed the gathering competitors, she began to understand the magnitude of the challenge before them. This was not simply about athletic ability. It was about navigating a complex cultural institution that had developed over millennia. The other species moved with the confidence of long familiarity, their coaches and support staff displaying an understanding of protocols and traditions that humans lacked entirely. The Korathian team captain, a being named Vorth, approached the human delegation with what might have been curiosity or amusement. His golden skin rippled with color patterns that Dr. Webb's cultural briefings suggested indicated friendly interest, though human knowledge of Korathian emotional displays remained limited. Vorth stood nearly 3 meters tall, his physique combining massive muscular development with surprising elegance of movement. "Welcome to your first championship," Vorth said through a translation device that rendered his words in accented but clear English. "We are honored to compete alongside the newest members of the Galactic community. Your species has achieved much in your brief time among the stars." Dr. Webb stepped forward, uncertain about proper diplomatic protocols for athletic competitions. "Thank you for the welcome. We're excited to participate and learn from the experience. This is all quite new to us." Vorth's skin shifted to patterns that the briefing material suggested indicated polite amusement. "Indeed, this will be educational for everyone. Your species approaches many things differently than we are accustomed to. It will be interesting to see how those differences manifest in athletic competition." Sarah noticed subtle condescension in the alien's tone, though she couldn't be certain whether this reflected translation limitations or genuine attitude. The briefing materials had warned that many galactic species viewed humans as newcomers, whose capabilities remained largely untested. Earth had joined the broader galactic community only 50 years ago, making humanity the youngest species ever invited to participate in the championships. The registration process itself proved bewildering. Each competing species was required to submit detailed biological and physiological data about their athletes, including information about their homeworld conditions, evolutionary adaptations, and metabolic requirements. The forms seemed designed for species with comprehensive databases about their physical capabilities and long histories of interspecies competition. Dr. Webb struggled to provide equivalent information about human athletes, working from incomplete scientific data and making educated guesses about how Earth's conditions compared to the galactic standard. Athletic Director Thymus Zeller, a tall, ethereal being from the Andorian Collective, presided over the registration process with an air of ancient authority. His species had been instrumental in establishing the championship format thousands of years ago, and his bearing suggested deep familiarity with every tradition and protocol. When he reached the human delegation, his expression shifted to what might have been professional curiosity mixed with skepticism. "Earth delegation," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of ceremonial formality. "Your participation marks a historic first in championship history. Never before have we welcomed a species with such limited galactic experience to these sacred competitions." Dr. Webb felt the attention of dozens of alien observers focusing on their small group. "We're honored by the invitation and committed to competing with respect for the traditions and dignity of the championships." Director Zeller reviewed the human registration materials with visible confusion. "Your biological data indicates significant diversity within your species. This is unusual. Most competing civilizations present athletes from standardized genetic lines, optimized for specific performance categories. Your athletes appear to represent natural genetic variation rather than selective enhancement." Sarah exchanged glances with her teammates. Earth's selection committee had chosen athletes based on natural ability and training achievements, never considering that other species might approach athletic development through genetic optimization or enhancement programs. The realization that they might be competing against beings specifically bred or modified for athletic performance was both intimidating and enlightening. "Human athletic achievement is based on natural ability combined with training and dedication," Dr. Webb explained. "We don't employ genetic modification or selective breeding for athletic purposes." The director's expression suggested this information was both surprising and potentially concerning. "This approach is admirable but may present significant competitive challenges. The championship events are designed to test the limits of optimized athletic capability. Natural variation, while honorable, rarely achieves the performance levels required for meaningful participation." Jessica Park stepped forward, her gymnast's confidence overriding diplomatic caution. We understand we may be at a disadvantage in some areas, but we're here to compete to the best of our abilities and represent our world with honor. Director Zeller's demeanor softened slightly at this display of determination. Your attitude is commendable. The spirit of competition transcends genetic optimization. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. We welcome your participation and hope the experience proves educational for all involved. The opening ceremonies began that evening under the light of Zephyria Prime's 3 suns, the massive stadium filled with beings from across the galaxy, creating a spectacular display of biological and cultural diversity. The human athletes found themselves overwhelmed by the sensory experience of colors, sounds, and movements that had no equivalent in Earth's sporting events. Ancient traditions played out with ceremonial precision that spoke to thousands of years of careful preservation. Each competing species presented their athletes through elaborate processions that honored their homeworld's culture and athletic heritage. The Korathians performed synchronized demonstrations of strength that involved manipulating massive crystalline structures. The Vexillans flowed through aerial displays that defied what humans understood about the limitations of biological movement. Species after species demonstrated capabilities that seemed to transcend the boundaries of what Sarah and her teammates had considered possible in athletic competition. When Earth's delegation was announced, they walked onto the ceremonial platform, feeling acutely aware of their simplicity compared to the magnificent displays that had preceded them. Dr. Webb had arranged for them to wear traditional Earth athletic uniforms representing different continents and sporting traditions, hoping to convey something of humanity's cultural diversity. The gesture felt inadequate in the face of the spectacular alien presentations, but the human athletes carried themselves with quiet dignity. The crowd's response was polite but notably subdued. Sarah could sense curiosity about these newcomers, but also skepticism about what contribution such an obviously primitive species might make to the ancient competition. The translation systems carried fragments of commentary from the audience, most of it focusing on humanity's youth as a spacefaring civilization and speculation about whether they possessed any athletic capabilities worthy of the championship setting. High Commissioner Drath Morgelis, the senior official responsible for championship administration, delivered the traditional opening address from a platform that floated above the stadium floor. His species, the Eternals, had presided over the games for their entire 8,000-year history, their extended lifespans allowing individual officials to maintain continuity across centuries of competition. Commissioner Morgelis himself had overseen 47 previous championships, making him the most experienced athletics administrator in galactic history. Welcome, athletes of the galaxy, to the 402nd Galactic Athletic Championships. His voice resonated through translation systems that carried his words to every being in the massive stadium. For 8 millennia, these sacred competitions have celebrated the pinnacle of physical achievement and the bonds of sporting fellowship that unite our diverse civilizations. The commissioner's gaze swept across the assembled athletes, pausing briefly on the human delegation before continuing. This championship marks several historic firsts. We welcome new participants whose inclusion expands the boundaries of our galactic community. We honor traditions that have guided these competitions since their founding, while embracing the growth and evolution that keeps them vital and meaningful. Sarah felt the weight of representing her entire species in this ancient institution. The responsibility was both thrilling and terrifying, made more intense by her growing understanding of just how unprepared humanity was for what lay ahead. The briefing materials had not conveyed the true scope and complexity of the championships, nor the depth of tradition and protocol that governed every aspect of the competition. The formal competition schedule was announced during the opening ceremonies, revealing a complexity that staggered the human delegation. Rather than Earth's familiar model of concentrated events over a brief period, the Galactic Championships were structured as an elaborate seasonal progression spanning 4 full months. Different types of events were scheduled according to ancient traditions that honored various cultural and astronomical phenomena important to participating civilizations. The first month would focus on endurance competitions, including events that tested not just physical stamina but mental resilience and adaptive capability. The second month emphasized technical precision and skill-based challenges that required mastery of complex movement patterns and equipment usage. The third month centered on strength and power events designed to showcase the absolute physical limits of competing species. The final month featured team competitions and ceremonial challenges that combined athletic ability with cultural knowledge and strategic thinking. Each month included mandatory rest periods, cultural exchanges, and ceremonial observances that were considered integral to the championship experience. Athletes were expected to participate in educational programs about galactic history and interspecies cooperation. There were formal dinners, artistic presentations, and diplomatic receptions that served both social and competitive functions. The entire structure reflected a philosophy that viewed athletic competition as inseparable from cultural understanding and mutual respect. Dr. Webb realized with growing alarm that the human delegation was woefully unprepared for most of these requirements. They had trained athletes for physical competition but had no framework for the cultural and diplomatic aspects that seemed equally important to championship success. The educational programs assumed knowledge of galactic history that humans barely possessed. The ceremonial events required understanding of traditions that had never been adequately explained to Earth's preparation committee. Marcus Rivera, the marathon runner, approached Dr. Webb after the opening ceremonies with questions that reflected the entire team's confusion. "Doc, I've been talking to some of the other endurance athletes, and their training includes stuff I've never heard of. Multi-gravitational adaptation, atmospheric composition adjustment, metabolic synchronization with different stellar cycles. How are we supposed to compete in events we don't understand?" Dr. Webb consulted his data tablet, searching through the limited information Earth's scientists had been able to compile. The Galactic Athletic Council provided event descriptions, but they assume familiarity with conditions and concepts that are new to us. "We're going to have to learn as we go and adapt to situations as they develop." Elena Petrov, the strength athlete, joined the conversation with her own concerns. "I've been watching the warm-up areas. Some of these beings are lifting weights that would be impossible under Earth gravity. Their bone density, muscle fiber composition, everything about their physiology is optimized for performance levels that humans can't match through natural development." The twins, David and Daniel Okoro, had spent the evening observing the sprinting specialists from other species. Their report was similarly sobering. The Korathians have muscle fiber types that don't exist in human physiology. The Vexillans have joint structures that allow movement patterns we can't replicate. We're not just competing against better training or superior technique. We're competing against fundamental biological advantages that evolution gave other species. Sarah listened to these concerns while wrestling with her own observations. The swimming venues included aquatic environments that bore little resemblance to Earth's familiar pools and open water. Some events took place in liquid methane under crushing atmospheric pressure. Others involved navigation through three-dimensional aquatic mazes that challenged spatial reasoning as much as swimming ability. The distance events she had trained for on Earth seemed laughably simple compared to the multi-environmental challenges that galactic competition apparently required. Jessica Park, ever the optimist, tried to maintain team morale despite the daunting revelations. "Look, we knew we were going to be at a disadvantage coming into this, but we're here, and we're going to compete. Maybe we can't match their genetic advantages, but we can show them what human determination and adaptability look like." Dr. Webb appreciated her attitude while remaining deeply concerned about the practical realities they faced. The more he learned about championship traditions and expectations, the more he realized that humanity's invitation might have been issued without full understanding of the challenges involved. The Galactic Athletic Council seemed to have assumed that any species advanced enough for space travel would possess athletic capabilities and cultural knowledge that humans simply lacked. The accommodation arrangements provided another indication of how unprepared Earth was for this experience. Each competing species was housed in environmental conditions that matched their homeworld requirements. The Korathians lived in high-gravity chambers with atmospheric composition that would be toxic to humans. The Vexillans required low-gravity environments with specific humidity and pressure ranges. The crystalline beings from the Helix Nebula needed exposure to particular electromagnetic frequencies to maintain their metabolic functions. The human delegation was assigned to standard atmospheric conditions that approximated Earth's environment, but even these accommodations revealed gaps in understanding. The artificial gravity was set slightly higher than Earth normal, the atmospheric pressure was optimized for sea level performance, and the lighting cycles followed a pattern that didn't match any human circadian rhythm. Small differences that seemed minor individually combined to create an environment that was subtly but persistently uncomfortable. The first week was designated as an acclimatization period, allowing athletes to adjust to local conditions and familiarize themselves with championship protocols. This proved to be an educational experience that was both fascinating and humbling for the human team. They attended orientation sessions that covered everything from equipment regulations to cultural sensitivity guidelines, discovering layers of complexity they had never imagined. The equipment regulations alone filled a document longer than most novels. Different events required specific types of gear that had been developed over millennia of interspecies competition. Some equipment was designed to level playing fields between species with different physiological advantages. Other gear was intended to amplify natural abilities within strictly defined parameters. The regulations specified approved materials, manufacturing standards, calibration requirements, and usage protocols that seemed designed by committee over thousands of years. Dr. Webb spent days trying to understand which equipment categories applied to human athletes and how to obtain the necessary gear. Earth's sporting goods industry had no experience manufacturing equipment to galactic standards, and importing the necessary items required navigating bureaucratic procedures that assumed familiarity with interspecies commerce regulations. The costs alone were staggering, requiring emergency funding from Earth's xenodiplomacy budget that had never anticipated supporting athletic competition. The cultural sensitivity guidelines presented equally complex challenges. Each participating species had specific traditions and taboos that could affect competition outcomes if violated. Some species considered certain types of physical contact during competition to be deeply offensive. Others had religious observations that required particular ceremonial acknowledgments before and after events. The guidelines included detailed protocols for interspecies interaction during competition, rest periods, and social functions. Sarah found herself studying these cultural requirements with the same intensity she had once devoted to swimming technique. The aquatic championships, her primary competitive focus, included participants from 7 different species with water-based evolutionary backgrounds. Each species had different concepts of fair play, competitive honor, and appropriate interaction protocols. What humans considered normal competitive behavior could be interpreted as aggression, disrespect, or cultural insensitivity by beings with different social frameworks. The training facilities available during Acclimatization Week provided another eye-opening experience. The championship complex included exercise and preparation areas designed to accommodate the diverse needs of hundreds of different species. Some areas featured crushing gravity that would flatten human bones. Others provided near-weightless environments where humans floated helplessly while aliens with appropriate adaptations moved with perfect control. The aquatic training facilities alone occupied several square kilometers, featuring dozens of different liquid environments with varying composition, temperature, pressure, and chemical properties. Sarah's Earth training had prepared her for competition in chlorinated pools and natural bodies of water. The galactic facilities included environments filled with liquid ammonia, pressurized methane, and chemically complex solutions that would dissolve human tissue on contact. Marcus Rivera discovered that the endurance training areas included environmental chambers that simulated conditions from across the galaxy. Atmospheric compositions ranging from pure oxygen at crushing pressure to methane-heavy mixtures that would suffocate humans instantly. Temperature ranges that spanned from cryogenic cold to molten metal heat. Gravitational conditions that varied from weightlessness to forces that would crush Earth-adapted physiology. The strength training facilities showcased the incredible diversity of what different species considered appropriate resistance exercise. Elena Petrov watched beings casually manipulating masses that would require industrial machinery on Earth. Some species trained by wrestling with mechanical devices that generated forces measured in megatons. Others worked against gravitational fields that could alter the fundamental properties of matter. During one particularly humbling training session, Sarah found herself sharing pool space with Narrative Flowing Current, a champion aquatic athlete from the Oceanic Federation. Narrative's species had evolved in the crushing depths of their homeworld's planet-spanning ocean, developing physiological adaptations that made them incredibly formidable in any aquatic environment. Her bone density was 3 times that of humans, her lung capacity was enormous, even accounting for her larger size, and her muscle fiber composition generated power outputs that seemed to violate what Sarah understood about biological limits. Narita moved through the water with an efficiency that was both beautiful and devastating to human confidence. Her stroke technique incorporated movements that human anatomy couldn't replicate, generated propulsion through mechanisms that Earth swimmers had never imagined, and maintained speeds that would set world records on Earth while appearing to require minimal effort. Watching her train was like observing a different category of existence entirely. "Your swimming style is interesting," Nerida said during a rest period, her voice carrying the liquid musical quality typical of her species. "You use techniques I have not observed before. There is efficiency in your movement patterns that suggests intelligent adaptation to your environmental conditions." Sarah felt both complimented and patronized by the comment. "Thank you. I've been swimming competitively for 15 years and have tried to develop the most efficient technique possible." Nerida's expression conveyed what might have been friendly curiosity. "Your homeworld's aquatic environments must present unique challenges to have produced such specialized adaptations. The stroke mechanics you demonstrate suggest evolution in response to specific hydrodynamic conditions." The conversation highlighted one of the fundamental disconnects between human and galactic approaches to athletic development. Nerida viewed Sarah's technique as an evolutionary adaptation rather than a learned skill. Assuming that human swimming ability represented millions of years of genetic optimization rather than individual training and development. The distinction seemed to escape most alien observers, who interpreted human athletic achievements through the lens of their own genetically based performance models. Dr. Webb struggled with similar misconceptions during his meetings with other team administrators and coaches. The galactic athletic community seemed unable to conceive of performance development through training and practice alone. They kept looking for the genetic modifications, selective breeding programs, or environmental adaptation protocols that had produced human capabilities. When Dr. Webb explained that Earth's athletes achieved their performance levels through natural talent combined with dedicated training, the response was typically polite skepticism. Coach Thymus Vexillan, a veteran administrator from the Korathian delegation, exemplified this attitude during a diplomatic reception honoring first-time participating species. "Your athletes demonstrate commendable dedication," he told Dr. Webb over drinks that glowed with bioluminescent properties. "But surely your species employs some form of genetic optimization or metabolic enhancement to achieve competitive performance levels. Natural variation alone rarely produces athletic capability sufficient for meaningful championship participation." Dr. Webb had grown tired of explaining humanity's approach to athletic development, but diplomatic necessity required patience. Human athletic achievement is based on identifying individuals with natural talent and supporting their development through training, nutrition, and technical coaching. We don't modify genetics or employ artificial enhancement. Coach Vexillan's skin patterns shifted to what the cultural briefings indicated was polite confusion. This approach is admirable but inefficient. Why would a species limit athletic potential to natural genetic variation when optimization techniques can produce far superior results? The ethical considerations must be significant to justify such competitive disadvantage. The question revealed assumptions about competitive philosophy that had never occurred to Earth's athletic community. Most galactic species apparently viewed genetic optimization and artificial enhancement as normal aspects of athletic development, raising questions about what constituted fair competition and natural ability. The human delegation began to understand that they were not just competing against superior training or technique, but against fundamentally different concepts of what athletic competition should represent. The first competitive events were scheduled to begin in the second week, starting with preliminary qualifications for the endurance competitions. Marcus Rivera spent the remaining acclimatization time trying to understand what he would face in his specialty events. The marathon equivalent competition involved covering a distance roughly equivalent to 42 Earth kilometers, but under conditions that bore little resemblance to familiar road racing. The course varied gravitational conditions along its length, beginning in standard Earth equivalent gravity but progressing through zones of increasing intensity that would reach twice normal Earth gravity by the midpoint. The second half of the course featured decreasing gravity, ending in conditions that approached weightlessness and required different running techniques entirely. The atmospheric composition also varied, starting in standard oxygen-nitrogen mixtures, but transitioning through zones with different gas combinations that required metabolic adaptation. Marcus had trained for his entire career in Earth's stable gravitational and atmospheric conditions. The idea of adapting his running technique and metabolic function to constantly changing environmental parameters was completely outside his experience. During practice runs on abbreviated course sections, he discovered that his carefully developed running form became awkward and inefficient as soon as gravitational conditions deviated from Earth normal. Other endurance specialists had trained extensively in variable gravity environments, developing techniques for maintaining efficient movement across a wide range of conditions. Their stride patterns adjusted automatically to gravitational changes. Their breathing adapted seamlessly to atmospheric variations. Their energy expenditure remained constant, despite environmental challenges that left Marcus gasping and struggling to maintain basic coordination. The twins, David and Daniel Okoro, faced similar challenges in the sprint events. Galactic sprint competitions took place on specially designed tracks that featured different surface materials and environmental conditions for each lane. Some lanes provided standard solid surfaces similar to Earth tracks, but others featured low-traction materials that required completely different acceleration techniques. Several lanes included gravitational anomalies that could either assist or impede runner performance, depending on technique and timing. The sprint distances themselves were standardized to accommodate different species' stride patterns and physiological characteristics, but the standardization process had produced measurements that didn't translate clearly to familiar Earth distances. The primary sprint event covered approximately 100 meters, but the track configuration included curves, elevation changes, and surface transitions that made direct comparison to human sprint experience impossible. David and Daniel had built their careers on explosive acceleration and maximum velocity maintenance over straight, flat surfaces with consistent traction and environmental conditions. The Galactic sprint format required constant adaptation to changing track conditions, strategic decision-making about lane positioning and surface utilization, and tactical flexibility that went far beyond pure speed development. During practice sessions, they watched alien sprinters demonstrate capabilities that redefined what they understood about running speed. Some species achieved velocities that would be impossible for human physiology, while others employed movement techniques that didn't resemble running at all, but somehow generated equivalent forward momentum. The variety of approaches to achieving maximum speed was both educational and intimidating. Elena Petrov's preparation for strength events revealed perhaps the most dramatic differences between human and galactic athletic traditions. Earth's weightlifting and powerlifting focused on moving maximum loads through specific movement patterns using standardized equipment and techniques. Galactic strength competitions included events that tested absolute power output, but also emphasized strength endurance, dynamic movement under load, and adaptive capability with unfamiliar resistance systems. The equipment alone challenged everything Elena understood about strength training. Some events used traditional weight systems similar to Earth's barbells and dumbbells, but constructed from materials with densities that produced incredible loading even in manageable sizes. Other events featured resistance systems based on magnetic fields, gravitational manipulation, or mechanical devices that generated opposition forces through principles that human engineering had never explored. Elena's Earth training had optimized her performance with familiar equipment, using movement patterns she had practiced for thousands of hours. The Galactic events required her to generate maximum power output, using devices she had never seen before, through movement ranges that challenged her flexibility and coordination against resistance systems that behaved in unpredictable ways. During one memorable training session, she attempted a lifting event that used gravitational field manipulation to create resistance. The weight felt normal during the initial lift, but as she moved through the range of motion, the gravitational field shifted in ways that constantly changed the effective load. What began as a manageable weight became impossibly heavy at the midpoint of the lift, then shifted to near weightlessness at the completion. The technique required constant adjustment and anticipation that was completely outside her experience. Jessica Park's gymnastics background provided perhaps the best preparation for galactic competition, since gymnastics already emphasized adaptability, precision, and performance under varying conditions. However, the technical events in galactic competition expanded the concept of gymnastics far beyond Earth's familiar apparatus and movement patterns. Some events took place in altered gravitational fields that allowed movement patterns impossible under Earth conditions. Gymnasts could achieve impossible heights and sustain aerial sequences that would violate physics on Earth. Other events incorporated three-dimensional movement through complex apparatus configurations that required spatial reasoning and movement planning far beyond traditional gymnastics. The scoring systems for technical events emphasized artistic expression and cultural interpretation as much as physical execution. Competitors were expected to incorporate elements from their species' movement traditions and aesthetic values into their performance routines. Jessica's Earth training had focused on precise execution of established movement patterns, but galactic competition required creative expression and cultural communication through movement. The judging panels for technical events included representatives from multiple species, each bringing different aesthetic preferences and cultural values to their evaluation criteria. What one species considered beautiful and expressive might be meaningless or even offensive to another species. Competitors needed to create performances that could communicate across cultural boundaries, while demonstrating physical capabilities that impressed judges with vastly different concepts of athletic excellence. As the first competitive events approached, the human delegation grappled with the reality that they were about to participate in competitions they didn't fully understand, using techniques they had never mastered, against opponents whose capabilities seemed to transcend the limitations of Earth-based athletic development. The experience was both thrilling and terrifying, representing humanity's first opportunity to test their capabilities against galactic standards, while revealing just how much they had yet to learn about what athletic excellence could represent. Dr. Webb spent the final days before competition began updating Earth's athletic governing bodies about what the team was discovering. His reports painted a picture of competitive challenges that were far more complex and demanding than anyone had anticipated, but also highlighted learning opportunities that could revolutionize human understanding of athletic potential and training methodology. The human athletes themselves approached the upcoming competition with a mixture of excitement, determination, and realistic assessment of their prospects. They understood that they were unlikely to achieve medal-level performance in most events, but they were committed to representing Earth with dignity and using the experience to establish foundations for future human participation in galactic athletics. Sarah stood on the warm-up deck overlooking the main aquatic venue, watching alien swimmers whose capabilities redefined what she thought possible in the water. Tomorrow would bring her first competitive event, a distance swim through multiple environmental zones that would test everything she had learned about adaptation and perseverance. She felt nervous, but also grateful for the opportunity to represent her species in this ancient and honored competition. The opening of actual competition would reveal whether humanity's unique approaches to athletic development could find success in the galactic arena, or whether the gap between Earth's athletic traditions and galactic expectations was simply too wide to bridge. Either way, the human delegation was about to make history as the first of their kind to compete in the galaxy's most prestigious athletic celebration. The first month of competition proceeded exactly as the galactic establishment expected. Human athletes struggled through events they barely understood, while alien competitors dominated with centuries of refined technique and genetic advantages. Sarah Chen finished dead last in her opening distance swim, gasping through environmental transitions that left her disoriented and exhausted. Marcus Rivera collapsed during his marathon attempt when the gravitational shifts overwhelmed his Earth-adapted physiology. The twins failed to advance past preliminary heats and sprint events, where their natural speed looked pedestrian against genetically optimized opponents. Media coverage across the galaxy focused on the predictable failure of the primitive newcomers. Sports commentators discussed human participation as a curiosity rather than legitimate competition. Betting markets had removed human athletes from consideration entirely after their dismal opening performances. The galactic athletic community viewed Earth's delegation with polite sympathy, mixed with barely concealed condescension. Commissioner Morgellus privately questioned whether inviting such an unprepared species had been a mistake. The humans seemed overwhelmed by every aspect of the competition, from basic equipment usage to understanding fundamental rules. Their coaches appeared confused by concepts that other species considered elementary. The cultural exchange programs meant to foster interspecies understanding were hampered by humanity's obvious lack of preparation for galactic society. Behind closed doors, athletic directors from established species discussed implementing minimum qualification standards that would prevent future embarrassments. The Korathians suggested requiring genetic optimization certificates for participation. The Vexillans proposed mandatory centuries of galactic cultural education before allowing new species to compete. The consensus seemed to be that while human determination was admirable, their inclusion had diminished the competition's prestige. Dr. Webb watched his athletes struggle through event after event while maintaining public dignity despite private frustration. The humans were learning valuable lessons about galactic competition, but at the cost of repeated public failure that reflected poorly on their entire species. He began receiving communications from Earth, questioning whether continued participation was worthwhile given the negative publicity and apparent futility of their efforts. The turning point came during the second month, when technical malfunctions began plaguing the championship infrastructure. The competition relied on incredibly complex systems that had operated flawlessly for thousands of years, maintained by automated processes, and overseen by artificial intelligence networks that understood every component perfectly. These systems had been gradually upgraded and modified across millennia, creating technological architectures of stunning complexity and efficiency. The first failure occurred during a precision gymnastics event, when the gravitational field generators began fluctuating unpredictably. Competitors found themselves suddenly weightless in the middle of routines, then crushed by triple gravity without warning. The automated systems that should have detected and corrected such problems seemed unable to identify the source of the malfunction. Event officials postponed competition while technical teams investigated the mysterious failures. Within days, similar problems emerged across multiple venues. Atmospheric control systems began producing dangerous gas mixtures in aquatic facilities. Sprint track surfaces started shifting density randomly, creating treacherous conditions that injured several alien athletes. Strength equipment malfunctioned in ways that generated unpredictable resistance patterns, making safe competition impossible. The automated diagnostic systems returned error codes that made no sense to the Galactic technicians responsible for maintaining championship infrastructure. These were patterns of failure that had never occurred in thousands of years of operation. The artificial intelligence networks that managed the facilities seemed unable to process what was happening, their responses becoming increasingly erratic as they attempted to apply standard solutions to unprecedented problems. Emergency technical committees worked frantically to restore normal operations while competition ground to a halt. Representatives from the galaxy's most advanced technological civilizations found themselves baffled by equipment failures that defied their understanding of how the systems should behave. The malfunctions seemed random but were occurring with suspicious frequency across unrelated facility components. Sarah Chen was stretching near the aquatic venue when she noticed something that the official investigation teams had missed. The timing patterns of the atmospheric control failures followed a subtle rhythm that reminded her of oceanic current variations she had studied while training for long-distance swimming. The fluctuations weren't random. They were following natural patterns that the automated systems weren't designed to recognize or accommodate. She mentioned her observation to Dr. Webb, who initially dismissed it as irrelevant. But, as more technical failures occurred, he began to see connections that the Galactic experts were missing. The malfunctions seemed to cluster around systems that had been heavily modified over time, creating complexity layers that might be interacting in unexpected ways. The diagnostic protocols assumed logical system behavior, but these failures suggested something more organic was occurring. Marcus Rivera noticed similar patterns during his analysis of the gravitational field problems affecting the endurance courses. The fluctuations reminded him of altitude variations he had encountered while training in mountain environments on Earth. There was an underlying rhythm to the instability that suggested natural adaptation rather than random mechanical failure. The systems seemed to be responding to environmental pressures in ways that their creators hadn't anticipated. Jessica Park's gymnastics background gave her insight into the equipment malfunctions affecting technical events. The resistance variations in the apparatus followed patterns that resembled the natural adjustments she made when performing routines in different conditions. It was as if the equipment was trying to adapt to environmental changes, but lacked the flexibility to do so effectively, creating dangerous overcorrections instead of smooth transitions. Dr. Webb began compiling these human observations into a comprehensive analysis that painted a very different picture of what was happening. The Galactic technical teams were approaching the failures as mechanical problems requiring engineering solutions. But the human athletes were recognizing patterns that suggested the highly evolved championship systems were experiencing something more like biological adaptation stress. When Dr. Webb presented his team's analysis to the technical committee, the initial response was polite skepticism. Galactic engineers had thousands of years of experience with these systems and access to diagnostic tools that humans couldn't even understand. The suggestion that primitive newcomers might identify problems that advanced civilizations had missed seemed preposterous to most committee members. However, Commissioner Morgellus was desperate enough to consider any potential solution. The continued technical failures were threatening to cancel the entire championship, a catastrophe that would end his career and damage the institution's reputation across the galaxy. He authorized the human delegation to work with technical teams on an experimental basis, despite strong objections from several committee members. Sarah was the first human to work directly with Galactic technical staff on facility repairs. Her analysis of the aquatic system failures led her to suggest modifications that seemed to violate basic engineering principles, but somehow stabilized the atmospheric control problems. Instead of fighting the natural variation patterns, she recommended programming the systems to flow with them, allowing controlled adaptation rather than rigid resistance. The concept was so foreign to galactic engineering philosophy that it took hours of explanation before the technical teams understood what she was proposing. Their approach had always emphasized perfect control and predictable behavior. Sarah's suggestion required accepting uncertainty and building flexibility into systems that had been designed for absolute precision. When they implemented her recommendations on a trial basis, the atmospheric control systems immediately stabilized. The random fluctuations that had plagued competition for days disappeared as the equipment learned to work with natural variation patterns rather than fighting them. The success was so dramatic that word spread quickly through the technical community. Marcus's insights into gravitational field management proved equally valuable. His understanding of how natural systems adapted to environmental stress helped engineers recognize that their field generators were experiencing harmonical resonance problems that had been building for decades. Instead of the mechanical solutions they had been attempting, Marcus suggested organic adjustments that allowed the systems to find natural equilibrium. Jessica's work with the technical apparatus revealed that much of the equipment had evolved beyond its original design parameters through centuries of incremental modifications. The complexity had reached a point where traditional diagnostic methods couldn't track all the interaction effects. Her gymnast's understanding of movement and balance helped engineers identify where rigid programming was creating stress points that led to cascading failures. Elena Petrov's contribution came through her recognition that the strength equipment failures followed patterns similar to fatigue stress in human muscles. The devices were being pushed beyond their adaptive capacity by demands that exceeded their design margins. Her experience with managing physical stress and recovery provided insights into giving the equipment rest cycles that allowed internal systems to recalibrate. The twins, David and Daniel, discovered that the sprint track surface problems were caused by interaction effects between different material layers that had been added over time. Their sprinter's sensitivity to surface conditions helped them identify how the various materials were affecting each other in ways that created instability. Their solution involved treating the track as a living system that needed to be managed holistically, rather than as separate components. Within a week of human involvement, the technical problems that had threatened to destroy the championship were completely resolved. More remarkably, the systems were now operating more efficiently than they had in centuries. The human approach of working with natural variation and accepting controlled adaptation had optimized performance in ways that traditional galactic engineering had never achieved. The success created a sensation throughout the galactic technical community. Engineers who had dismissed human capabilities were forced to acknowledge that Earth's primitive approach to problem-solving had succeeded where their advanced methods had failed. The humans had brought perspectives that thousands of years of galactic civilization had somehow overlooked. Commissioner Morgellus faced a diplomatic crisis as word of human technical contributions spread. The same species that had been written off as athletic failures had saved the most prestigious sporting event in galactic history. Media coverage shifted from mocking human incompetence to celebrating their unexpected expertise. The athletic community found itself reconsidering everything they thought they knew about these primitive newcomers. When competition resumed with perfectly functioning facilities, the human athletes returned to their predictable pattern of poor performance in traditional events. But now their failures were viewed through a completely different lens. Instead of confirming human inadequacy, each struggle demonstrated the courage of athletes competing against impossible odds, while simultaneously contributing crucial technical expertise that kept the competition running. The galaxy's perception of the human delegation transformed overnight. Where they had seen primitive embarrassment, observers now recognized determination and unique capability. The humans might not win medals, but they had proven their value to galactic civilization in ways that transcended athletic competition. Their different approach to problem-solving had saved an institution that was thousands of years older than their entire civilization. In the final weeks of competition, something unprecedented occurred. Other species began seeking out human athletes for advice on technical problems and training approaches. The Korathians discovered that human insights into natural adaptation could improve their rigid optimization programs. The Vexillans found that human flexibility concepts enhanced their precision-focused techniques. Commissioner Morgellus announced during the closing ceremonies that the human delegation would receive a special recognition for distinguished service to galactic athletics. More significantly, he revealed that the championship infrastructure would be permanently modified to incorporate human-developed adaptation principles. The techniques that had saved this year's competition would be integrated into the facility's core operating systems. Sarah Chen stood on the podium not as a medal winner, but as a representative of a species that had redefined what contribution meant in galactic competition. The humans had lost nearly every athletic event they entered, but they had won something more valuable: respect and recognition as equals in the galactic community. The invitation for humanity's continued participation in future championships was not just honorary courtesy, but genuine desire for their unique perspectives and problem-solving abilities. Earth's athletes might never dominate galactic competition, but they had proven that value came in many forms, and that diversity of approach strengthened everyone. Dr. Webb watched the closing ceremonies with satisfaction that went far beyond athletic achievement. The human delegation had accomplished something that victory in competition could never have provided. They had earned their place in galactic society through demonstrating that their differences were strengths rather than weaknesses. The championships that had traditionally lasted 4 months had been completed in half that time, thanks to the efficiency improvements that human technical contributions had achieved. The galaxy had learned that sometimes the greatest victories came not from being the fastest or strongest, but from bringing new ways of thinking to old problems. As the human delegation prepared to return to Earth, they carried with them not just the experience of galactic competition, but the knowledge that their species had something unique and valuable to offer the broader galaxy. The Olympics had indeed lasted months, as they always had, until humans showed up and proved that different didn't mean inferior, just different in ways that could benefit everyone. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.